in the deserts of southern Peru, in the same haunted stretch of sand where the ancient Nazca people carved lines so vast you can only see them from the sky, a group of men climbed down into a hidden tomb and pulled out a body that should not exist. It was small, human-shaped, but not human. Its skull stretched back into a long, smooth dome. Its face had no ears, and where you'd expect a nose, there were only 2 holes. Its skin was the color of dust, wrapped tight over the bones. And its hands, this is the part that stopped the world, its hands had only 3 fingers. Long, elongated fingers, 3 of them, and 3 toes on each foot to match. Every one of them coated in a strange white powder, as if the desert itself had tried to preserve it forever. When the footage of that body reached the internet in 2017, it did not stay a local curiosity for long. Because the people who brought it into the light did not say, "Look at this strange mummy." They said something far bigger. They stood in front of cameras and in front of X-ray machines, and eventually in front of the Congress of an entire nation. And they said, "This is not a deformed human. This is not a fake. This is the preserved body of a non-human being, a creature from outside the human family tree entirely, and its existence rewrites the story of life on Earth." That is a sentence that, if it were true, would be the single most important discovery in human history. A physical, mummified body of a being that isn't human, pulled from a tomb in Peru. Textbooks torn up. Everything we think we know about who we are and whether we're alone, gone in an instant. So the whole planet leaned in and asked the only question that mattered: is it real? For years, that question has been fought over by journalists, ufologists, doctors, and forensic scientists, and it has been dragged into the halls of 2 national governments. And I promise you this, what was actually found inside those Nazca tombs does change how you'll see this story, but almost certainly not in the way the men holding the cameras wanted you to believe. The truth is darker, more human, and in its own way, more disturbing than an alien ever could be. This is Motech. To understand where these bodies came from, you have to understand who really found them, because it wasn't archaeologists in the careful sense of the word. It was huaqueros. In Peru, a huaquero is a grave robber, not a scientist, a looter. The deserts around Nazca and the neighboring town of Palpa are riddled with ancient tombs, thousands of years of the dead buried in the dry sand, and for generations, huaqueros have dug them up illegally, hunting for pottery, gold, textiles, anything a collector will pay for. It is a plague on Peru's heritage, and it is completely against the law. But it is also, quietly, an entire underground economy. According to the men who brought these mummies to the public, the bodies came from exactly that world, from a group of huaqueros operating out of Palpa, led by a man known only by the name Mario. The story goes that they were pulled from a cave in an area called La Millonaria, the millionaire, a place naturally rich in diatomaceous earth, that fine, white, fossil powder that coated the bodies and can dry out organic remains and preserve them for a very, very long time. From those looters, the specimens passed into the hands of promoters who understood their value was not in a collector's cabinet, but on camera. Chief among them, a French researcher named Thierry Jamin, who ran an institute in Cusco and became convinced the bodies were something extraordinary. And above all, Jaime Maussan, a Mexican broadcaster with a long, controversial history of presenting supposed alien evidence to the public. Together with the streaming channel Gaia, they unveiled the star specimen, a body they named Maria, to the world. And that is the first crack in the story, the one I want you to hold in the back of your mind for the rest of this video. The chain of custody for the most important discovery in human history does not begin in a laboratory. It begins with grave robbers, in the dark, with no record of exactly where or how anything was found. I'll come back to why that matters more than almost anything else. For now, put yourself in the room with Maria. Imagine you are there, 3:45. Pause for a moment and imagine you are one of the researchers, standing over Maria for the first time, before you've decided what you believe. She's laid out on a table, roughly the size of a small adult, and the first thing that hits you is how complete she is. This isn't a scrap of bone. It's a whole body, skin and all, dried to a pale, chalky gray by the powder packed around it. You lean in over the head, and it's wrong in a way that makes your stomach turn. The skull sweeps back in a long, egg-like dome, far longer than a human head has any business being. You move down to the hands, and there they are, 3 fingers. Not a hand missing 2 fingers, 3 long, fully formed fingers, each one built from more bones than yours, splayed out flat against the table. The feet match, 3 toes each. You count them again to be sure. You put the body under an X-ray, and the image glows up on the screen, and now the mystery deepens because there is a skeleton in there. Real bones, joints, a rib cage. This is not a rubber prop someone bought online. There is genuine biological structure inside it. The people around you start to get excited. Somebody says the word out loud for the first time, non-human. And you feel the pull of it, the sheer gravity of what it would mean if it were true. And then the doubts start whispering. Why does the skin look almost painted with that white powder? Why are the proportions of the body just slightly off, as if the pieces don't quite belong together? Why did this, the biggest find in the history of the world, come to you through looters, with no photographs of it actually in the ground, no soil samples, no map, no chain of evidence at all? You look at the 3-fingered hand again, and one thought pushes past all the others. If this is real, everything changes. But how would I ever prove it's real? And why does something this important feel like it's being sold to me? Here is where it gets strange. Because Maria was only the beginning. Soon there wasn't one body, there were several. Alongside the large specimen came a set of smaller ones. The promoters nicknamed things like the little ones, tiny, gray, big-headed figures that looked eerily like the classic gray alien of 1,000 science fiction posters. They were given names. They were given backstories. And each new reveal came with bigger and bigger claims layered on top. They claimed the bodies had 3 fingers and 3 toes because they were a separate species, not a deformed human. They claimed the skulls were naturally elongated, not bound or shaped. They claimed that inside one of the smaller bodies were strange rounded objects described by the promoters as eggs, as if the thing had been pregnant when it died. They claimed some contained metal implants made of exotic materials. And above all, they claimed the ultimate trump card, DNA. They said samples had been tested, and that the results showed a large percentage of the genetic code did not match any known creature on Earth, that it was, in their words, unknown. And the presentation escalated to match the claims. This was not a quiet paper in a scientific journal, it was a show. The bodies were flown between countries, wheeled out under television lights, laid in custom cases, and eventually carried into government buildings and set on tables in front of elected officials as if the aliens had finally landed and been invited to testify. Each reveal was bigger than the last, each one engineered for maximum shock and maximum spread. And that pattern-escalating spectacle, always more astonishing, always just out of reach of an independent lab, is itself a clue. Real discoveries get quieter and more careful as the evidence firms up. This one only ever got louder. Roll all of that together, and you have the perfect storm of a modern mystery. A mummified body, a 3-fingered hand, an elongated skull, eggs, metal implants, and unknown DNA. Each claim more explosive than the last, each one designed to make the case feel airtight. So how could anyone say this was fake, with all of that evidence stacked up? But that's exactly the point where you have to slow down. Because a claim is not evidence, and every single one of those explosive claims, the fingers, the skull, the eggs, the DNA, has a much simpler explanation waiting for it. There is no written record, no independent excavation, no peer-reviewed study accepted by the wider scientific community that backs any of it up. And I told you I'd explain why that silence matters. That silence is the whole story. But first, let's take the claims seriously, one at a time, and see where they crack. Could a real, living creature have hands like that? This is the image that sold the whole thing, the 3-fingered hand. Intuitively, it feels alien. Human beings have 5 fingers. Almost every mammal you can think of is built on a 5-digit blueprint. So, a body with 3 long fingers seems, at a glance, to come from somewhere else entirely. The promoters leaned on this hard. They pointed to the X-rays showing that each finger had multiple bones, real joints, a real internal structure. They argued that no one could simply fake that that you can't just glue a convincing three-fingered skeletal hand onto a body and fool an X-ray machine. But here's the counter question that hangs over it. What if you don't fake the bones? What if you rearrange real ones? A human hand contains a lot of small bones. So does a human foot. So do the hands and feet of animals. If you had access to genuine skeletal material and remember who supplied these bodies and where they got them, you could, in principle, take real bones and reassemble them into a longer, three-fingered shape that would absolutely show up as real structure on an X-ray, because it is real structure, just not in the order nature put it. Hold that thought, because it only gets worse. Is the long skull proof of a non-human species? The stretched, egg-shaped head is the second pillar of the alien claim, and here's the twist that the promoters really didn't want in the frame. Elongated skulls are completely real and completely human. For thousands of years, cultures all over the world, and especially in this exact part of Peru, practice something called artificial cranial deformation. When a baby's skull is still soft, you bind it with cloth, with boards, with pressure applied over months and years, and the growing skull elongates into a long, dramatic dome. The nearby Paracas culture is famous for it. The Nazca region is full of genuinely elongated ancient skulls, and every serious scientist agrees on why. They were shaped, deliberately, by human hands, on human children, as a mark of status or identity. And this is where the whole illusion quietly gives itself away. If you were a con artist standing in the Nazca desert, looking for raw material to build a convincing alien, what is the single most useful thing you could possibly get your hands on? A real, ancient, naturally preserved human body with a long, strange, elongated skull, a body that already looks half otherworldly to modern eyes, sitting in tombs by the hundreds, guarded by nothing but sand. The elongated skull didn't make these bodies harder to fake. It made them easier. The forgers weren't fighting against human anatomy. They were shopping in it. The very feature paraded as the strongest proof of the alien theory is, in reality, the receipt that proves a human grave was robbed to make it. So, an elongated skull in a Nazca tomb is not evidence of an alien. It is evidence of a Nazca. It is one of the most well-documented human customs in the region's archaeology. Which means the single most otherworldly feature of these bodies, the long head, is actually a fingerprint pointing straight back at the real, human, local dead. And that's not even the strangest part. Didn't the DNA tests prove they're not human? This was the promoters' knockout blow, the claim that genetic testing revealed a huge chunk of unknown DNA. It sounds unbeatable. DNA is science. DNA doesn't lie. But DNA testing is only as good as three things: the sample, the lab, and the independent verification. And on the Nazca bodies, all three are a problem. The tests the promoters cited were commissioned and paid for by the promoters themselves, not run by an independent, neutral institution and then confirmed by others. Unknown DNA very often doesn't mean alien. It means contaminated or degraded sample, or the mixing of DNA from more than one source, which can produce a genetic soup that doesn't cleanly match a reference database. And crucially, the wider scientific community was never given open, verifiable access to replicate the results, the one thing real science absolutely requires. When you can't check the work, unknown DNA isn't a discovery, it's a headline. Of course, the mysteries don't end there. Okay, so here's where we are. We've got a set of mummified bodies from the Nazca Desert, real, physical, with real biological material inside them. They have three-fingered hands, elongated skulls, and a stack of dramatic claims attached. Eggs, implants, unknown DNA. And every one of those claims has a much more ordinary explanation lining up behind it. Now, the two questions that actually decide this whole thing. The first is the one I promised to return to the silence. If these bodies were genuinely non-human, this would be, without exaggeration, the most important scientific event in the history of our species. And here is what that discovery is missing: independent excavation, a documented find spot, open samples shared with neutral laboratories around the world, and peer-reviewed confirmation. 60 years ago, a farmer's sledgehammer could reveal a real underground city, and the world's archaeologists came running to verify it. But the most important find imaginable, the proof that we are not alone, somehow arrives with none of that no verifiable dig, no chain of custody, promoted by the same few people, on camera, again and again. When something that huge is that allergic to independent verification, the silence is the answer. And the second, larger mystery, the one that swallows all the others. If they aren't aliens, then what exactly are they? And where did the bodies come from? Because that biological material is real. Those are real bones inside there. And if a real skeleton went into building a fake alien, then that skeleton belonged to something, and getting it meant opening a real grave. This is the question that turns a silly internet hoax into something genuinely dark. We'll get there. No one on the promoter's side was offering honest answers, only more claims. Which brings us to the second part of this video, the theories, and then what the scientists actually found. Theory 1. They are extraterrestrial. Start with the theory that launched 1,000 headlines. The bodies are aliens, literal extraterrestrials, visitors from another world, who died here long ago and were buried in the Peruvian desert. This is the version the loudest promoters pushed hardest, and you can see why it's irresistible. It connects to the Nazca lines, those enormous ground drawings that stretch across the desert, figures of a monkey, a hummingbird, a spider, a strange humanoid with a round head that some have nicknamed the astronaut, etched so large you can only fully see them from the air. For decades, a certain strain of speculation has insisted those lines were signals, or runways, or messages meant for visitors from the sky. So, when three-fingered bodies turned up in the very same desert, the story wrote itself. Here, at last, were the beings the lines were calling to. The Mummies and the Nazca lines became two halves of one irresistible narrative. And that narrative offers the biggest possible answer to the biggest possible question, are we alone? It turns a dusty, looted mummy into the discovery of the millennium, and it hands the person holding the camera the most valuable thing in media, a story people desperately want to be true. To this camp, the three fingers and the long skull aren't oddities to be explained away. They're the anatomy of a species that never came from Earth, and the Nazca lines are its calling card. It's a breathtaking claim, and it's built to be. But it gets more interesting. A softer version says, maybe not aliens from another planet, but a different kind of human, an unknown species or hybrid. A lost branch of the family tree that lived and died in the Andes and left these strange remains behind. This theory tries to keep the wonder while dialing back the science fiction. It leans on the fact that human history genuinely does contain surprises. Other human species really did exist in the deep past. Maybe, the theory goes, the Nazca bodies are the last trace of some undocumented people, anatomically distinct, wiped from the record. It sounds more reasonable than aliens, but not so fast. Theory 3. A modern fabrication. Then there's the theory the scientists gravitated toward almost immediately. The bodies are fakes, modern constructions, assembled by human hands and dressed up to look ancient and otherworldly. In this version, someone took materials, bones, skin, the white diatomaceous powder, to sell the ancient look and built figures designed to trigger every alien instinct we have. The big head, the almond eyes, the three fingers. Then they aged them, boxed them, and presented them with just enough real biology inside to survive a casual X-ray and fool an excited crowd. It's the least romantic theory, and it turned out to be the closest to the truth, though the full truth is worse than a simple fake. Theory 4. Looted and manipulated real remains. And that brings us to the theory that bridges everything, the one that explains why there's real biology inside a fake alien. What if the bodies are both real and fake? Real, ancient human remains looted from genuine Nazca region tombs by huaqueros, and then manipulated, taken apart, rearranged, added to, and reassembled into the shape of a non-human being. The elongated skull is real, because it came from a real Nazca person who was cranially deformed as a child. The bones are real, because they were robbed from the actual dead. The three-fingered hand is real bone just reordered. In this theory, no one had to invent alien anatomy. They only had to desecrate human anatomy. Hold on to that, because it's where this ends. So there they are, 4 theories, from visitors from space, to a lost human species, to a pure modern hoax, to real ancient dead reassembled into a lie. Each one tries to explain the bodies, and when actual forensic scientists finally got their hands on the evidence, only one of them was left standing. Let's do to these theories what the laboratories did to the mummies. Take them apart. The extraterrestrial theory collapses first, and hardest, on that fatal absence of verification. Not one neutral, independent scientific body examined these bodies and came away endorsing alien. The DNA claims were never opened up for the world to replicate. The find spots were never properly excavated. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and what was offered instead was extraordinary marketing. Wrong. The lost branch of humanity theory fails for a related reason. A genuinely new human species would be identified by real anatomists and geneticists working transparently, publishing, and inviting scrutiny not announced on a stage by a broadcaster with a track record of debunked alien reveals. There's no accepted anatomical or genetic case for a new species here at all. Wrong again. Which leaves the fabrication and the looted remains theories, and this is where it stops being a debate and becomes a documented finding. In January of 2023, Peruvian authorities intercepted 2 of these non-human mummies as they were being moved through Lima's international airport. The Institute of Forensic Legal Medicine, an actual forensic body, not a YouTube channel, examined them. Their conclusion was blunt. The pieces were false. One of the skulls belonged to a 4-legged mammal. The bodies were assembled from bird bones. And the pieces were held together with modern synthetic glue, a substance that did not exist in the ancient world. These were not pre-Hispanic. They were not natural. They were built. And then, in 2024, the Peruvian forensic archaeologist who led much of the analysis, Flavio Estrada, put it about as plainly as a scientist can. The bodies, he said, are dolls assembled from the bones of animals and humans, joined with glue and paper and metal. The claims that they came from another world or are anomalous in any way, he called totally false. Not aliens, not a lost species. Dolls, made recently, out of real bones. And it wasn't only the forensic labs. Peru's Ministry of Culture, the body responsible for protecting the country's archaeological heritage, publicly rejected the alien claims and condemned the whole affair, warning that the real damage being done was to genuine pre-Hispanic sites. Archaeologists and anthropologists across Peru lined up to say the same thing. These are not new species, and every attempt to present them as such does harm, because it launders the looting of real tombs behind a smokescreen of science fiction. The people best positioned to want a world-changing discovery in their own backyard were the ones most firmly telling the world it wasn't real. Do you see what happened? Every theory that promised wonder aliens, lost species, evaporated the moment neutral scientists were allowed to look. And the 2 boring theories, fabrication and looted remains, turned out to be the same theory and turned out to be true. The mystery of what they are is, scientifically, solved. But we didn't come all this way to stop at, it's a hoax. Because if you stop asking, are they aliens, and start asking, whose bones are these, and how did they get into these boxes? The real payoff of the Nazca tombs finally opens up in front of you, and it delivers, in full and in the worst possible way, on that promise that what they found inside changes human history. Here is what the forensic scientists agree on, the part no serious investigator disputes. There is real biology inside these figures, real bones. In cases examined, real human bones, and, disturbingly, in some of the smaller specimens, the remains consistent with children. That is the fact that turns your stomach when you finally understand it. The white powder, the wrapped skin, the fragile little bodies the world's cameras were pointed at, the things 2 national congresses debated as non-human beings. Some of them were built around the looted corpses of real human beings, possibly ancient children, robbed from their graves. Now follow that where it actually leads, because this is the reveal. The Nazca Desert is one of the richest archaeological landscapes on Earth. The genuine Nazca people who lived there 2,000 years ago were extraordinary. This is the culture that carved the Nazca lines across miles of desert, that engineered spiraling underground aqueducts still carrying water today, that wove some of the finest textiles of the ancient world, and that buried their dead with such care in soil so dry that the bodies mummified naturally and survived for millennia. They practiced the cranial shaping that gave those skulls their long, elegant domes. Everything alien about the mummies, the preservation, the elongated head, the ancient bone was stolen, quite literally, from the achievements of a real and remarkable human civilization. And here is the shock that the Nazca tombs really uncovered. It was never a story about visitors from another world. It was a story about us, about what human beings will do to each other's dead for money and fame. To manufacture those aliens, someone had to find real ancient tombs and tear them open. Someone had to take genuine human remains, the bones of Nazca men, women, and, it appears, children who were laid to rest with care 2,000 years ago and cut them apart, rearrange them, glue them into monsters, coat them in powder, and sell them as proof of extraterrestrial life. The desecration of an entire people's dead, repackaged as entertainment, and paraded in front of the world as the discovery of the millennium. Think about the sheer, cold effort behind that. This was not one crude fake knocked together in an afternoon. It was a production line. Bodies sourced from looters, selected for the most dramatic features, taken apart and rebuilt with real skeletal material, so they'd survive an X-ray, dusted with genuine fossil powder so they'd read as ancient, named, boxed, and marketed across borders for years. Someone invested real money and real planning into converting the ancient dead into a franchise. The aliens weren't found. They were manufactured, and the raw material was human grief, dug up and sold. That is what changes human history here. Not a new species, but a warning about how easily the record can be rewritten. Because this hoax did not stay on the fringe. It reached the floor of Mexico's Congress in 2023 in glass boxes on national television. It was dragged before Peru's Congress in 2024, even after forensic experts had already declared the specimens fabricated. For a moment, fake bodies built from robbed graves came astonishingly close to entering the historical record as real, and millions of people around the world still believe they are. That's the genuinely frightening lesson buried in the Nazca sand. The truth had to fight, in the halls of two governments, against a lie assembled from human bones, and the lie very nearly won. And here is the final haunting thought. The huaqueros are still out there. The looting of Peru's ancient tombs did not stop when the cameras arrived. If anything, the alien mummy craze put a price on exactly the kind of remains these bodies were built from, giving grave robbers one more reason to dig. Every fake alien that goes viral is, somewhere, a real ancient grave torn open to supply the parts. We went looking for proof that we are not alone in the universe. What we actually found, at the bottom of the Nazca tombs, was a mirror, and the thing staring back was us. So the next time someone shows you a three-fingered body in a glass box and tells you it changes everything, remember where those bones really came from. Remember the Nazca child, laid to rest 2,000 years ago under the driest sky on Earth, whose grave was opened not by an archaeologist, but by a thief, and whose remains were made to play an alien on television. You've opened the tombs with me. You've seen the bodies. You've heard every theory, and you've heard what the scientists actually found. So, I'll leave you with the only question that still matters. When a lie is convincing enough to reach the floor of a government, built from evidence real enough to fool a crowd, how much of what we think we know is standing on the same kind of sand? Let me know what you think is really out there. This has been Motech.